What's up, fellow Lords of Gaming, and welcome back to another episode of Marvel Future Revolution. Today we're going to get down to the good, the bad, and the ugly of Wolverine Specializations. Whole lot to see here because there's a lot going on. Like, my man has a shit ton of stuff going on inside of Specializations. So let me tell you how I look at Specializations. I don't like abilities or things, specializations or potentials and things like that that basically become situationally conditioned, meaning that I need to be in this specific condition in order to use this specific slot. Perfect case would be like a skill, not that one necessarily, but which one was it? Here we go. Ultimate weapon exploiting weakness. Basically, hitting an enemy whose guard gauge is at 50% or below increases guard damage by 10%. Okay, now that's 10% at this level, right? Obviously, these numbers are probably going to go up in terms of what they are. I just don't know what they are, and I'm not rushing to find them out because there's a specific effect that needs to be happened. That guard gauge of my enemy needs to be at or below a certain percentage to increase my guard damage by a certain percentage. I don't want to necessarily have to be, eyeing someone else's guard gauge that heavily in order to see this, so therefore it becomes very situational, and therefore I don't like it, right? So this is one of those abilities I've stayed away from. When we go back over here to like ultimate weapon, damage amplification, you can see it's like using an Adamantium Claws class skill increases all damage to super villains by a certain percentage, regardless of the upper limit. This is not necessarily a bad freaking skill, right? Like if you're going to be in the DZ and you're facing off against a lot of dark zone type enemies, this could be a very good skill. I don't happen to play a lot of dark zone. That's just me. And to be perfectly honest with you, some of the players that I play with, when I do go inside dark zone, I'm probably never going to be able to eclipse those guys in terms of raw stats. And what I mean raw stats is just raw attack numbers, right? So will this skill top me off in terms of being inside the DZ and get me over them? Probably not. That's just the truth. But if you are a DZ player and you're fighting against super villains, then there you go. If you're not fighting against super villains all the time, you can see where this becomes situational, right? So it might be one of those abilities that if you are a DZ player, you want to keep inside your tool chest so that way you can switch over to it. Not a bad thing overall, although I think there are better skills, right? So we look at another very situational ability here, which is ultimate weapon Berserker Rage. Becomes immortal for a certain amount of seconds upon sustaining fatal damage, preventing HP from falling below a percentage, and activates Hot Claws for 6 seconds. But you notice this hefty cooldown time, right? It's like 600 seconds on there. That's a fucking eternity inside this game. The time to kill on characters and areas that you're going to be in, that means you're maybe getting to use this ability one time, right? That's essentially what it is. Your time to die is not going to be that high. Like, let's be perfectly blunt and perfectly honest. This is one of the least tempting abilities to actually apply on my specializations, to just have this happen once every like 5 minutes or something like that. No thank you, I'm good. I'll stick away from this ability overall. Now, just because this ability doesn't have stats inside of it doesn't mean that I don't like it, so we'll come back to that one in a second. Let me explain to you some of the reasons I've chosen the skills to invest in that I have begun investing in, and we'll start up here in the top left tree with a couple of abilities. Number one is going to be this skill right here, Swift Strike Feral Focus. Using a target's skill decreases the cooldown of evolved hunter class skills by a certain percentage. We want to be investing in cooldown, HP recovery, and ultimate gauge recovery with Wolverine overall, because his ultimate gauge is just bar nothing phenomenal. It's probably one of the better ultimate gauge skills in the game. Think reminiscent to Magic when that was introduced. Like, to be honest with you, ultimates in this game don't feel so ultimate, which kind of reveals one of the problems of the game. But Wolverine's does actually feel ultimate in what it does. It makes him the best there is, the best there was, and probably the best there ever will be at what he does. So using a target skill decreases the cooldown of evolved hunter class skills by a percentage. So my estimation from the way this is read and the way it actually utilized is that the target skill is basically marking your targets, right? Which is basically your Swift Strike class skill. So if you use your first class skill that's inside of the ability for your first tree, then you will get the cooldown on your evolved hunter class skills, which already have uniquely low cooldown times, and so that gives you the uptime, which plays around with some of the other things. So here goes another ability I want you guys to take a look at, which is Adamantium Claws. Healing boost absorbs X% of the damage of active skill and the next skill as HP when using a Swift Strike class skill. So this is really good, right? Because if I utilize like a Swift Strike class skill that goes, hey, I'm going to utilize my target skill, and I'm going to get my mark for target up, which you should always be using. And then I'm going to roll into like evolved hunter class skills or adamantium claw class skills. Now I'm absorbing a certain X percentage of that damage from that skill and the next skill as HP, and that basically gives me recovery. So that's recovering up to 15% of max HP per skill use. Notice there's no cooldown on this. I suspect that in the future we're probably going to see some, but it's not as impactful as you think it is. Like in theory, you would think that this is good for PvE, right? In theory, you would think that there's going to be a whole lot more on this than what it is. Playing around with it, it doesn't necessarily hold water like as great as you think it is. Like it's not. It's weird. It's good, but it's not. Yeah, it's good, but it's not like you have to use it. I'm using it currently, but I'm probably going to switch out of that with playing around with some stuff. Another skill that I find that's going to be unique to everybody and probably in everyone's kit is basically Wolverine Swift Strike X Factor. Increases the attack equal to X% of HP recovery, and the attack is plus 100 per 1%. So this is really, really good, right? Because you're already probably looking at Wolverine as a character that you want to max the HP, max the HP recovery as much as you can. And so you're going to basically tack onto your attack by basically increasing your HP recovery. So we've seen this with like Spider-Man for dodge. We've seen this with like defense for Captain America. They're part of the character kit, and it innately, ties into the theme of the character, right? So this is an ability that I see is going to be on everybody's one. So I would definitely go one for this. Maybe not necessarily for this one, but this is one of those skills that I definitely think that everybody's gonna have is the Swift Strike class skill, right? So next up down here on the left hand bottom side is we're gonna look at Swift Strike Animal Instinct. Using an evolved hunter class skill 3 times recovers the ultimate skill gauge by 15%. This is a really cool skill, right? You notice inside no cooldown time on this either, right? So that essentially means every time that I use an evolved hunter class skill 3 times, I get to recover the skill gauge by 15%. This is why an ability like this one, where I'm going to reduce the cooldown of my hunter class skills, and I want to utilize the skills that have the lowest stamina requirements, so that way I can keep the uptime on those, because the more of those I'm using and able to rotate, the more that I'm going to have my ultimate gauge available to me. Just think about it that way. You see how the synergy starts to work there? That's synergy. So we're going to stick away from that skill for now. We're going to come down here to 10. This is one of those skills that's going to be very interesting, right? Swift Strike Precision Hit increases damage on a single target by 21%. So whether this is a sustained 21% across the board, or whether this is like a one-time on-target hit, I haven't been able to figure out, because I don't necessarily see anything trigger in terms of the character to notice when it's happening. But less for the sake of saying that I'm on a single target, this is a 21% flat, or even if it's not a 21% flat and it's like on an ability and sometimes it's triggering, is good. I think they need to improve and update the wording of this, because it doesn't exactly tell us what it's doing, and that's very important. Because if this becomes a situational thing where it's like once every 8 seconds or something like that, or like how it depends, or is it just a sustained flat rate 21% when I'm facing single target characters? Because if that means that it's only a sustain when I'm facing single targets, then that means I only want to really use this inside like raid, or I want to use it inside dimension duels. I don't necessarily want to use it. But if it's a flat sustained rate where anytime I'm facing off against a single target character, then I might have some benefit in using this. But right now, I'm reading this as if though it's a sustained flat rate, and so I'm keeping it inside there. If it doesn't become a sustained flat rate, then this basically becomes a specific PvP, type skill to use, and we gotta rotate out of there. We've looked at those skills, so you can see the skills that I'm using currently, where I'm using Swift Strike, the the Animal Instinct. I'm using the Swift Strike Precision Hit, and then you can see I'm also using X Factor, and then on the bottom here I'm using Adamantium Claws Healing Boost. So I'm thinking about more than likely leveling into this skill, which is called Ultimate Weapon Cutting Deeper. Now, if you are going to build out a Wolverine kit that's basically going to go debuffs, then this has high value to you. It deals X% more damage to an enemy in a ruptured state and 3% more damage to an enemy in a laceration state, and these stack, right? So essentially I want to be looking at this. If I have like a debuff where I'm going to go, hey, I mark my target, then I'm going to use a rupture skill that is usually underneath one of the Adamantium Claw skill, and then I'm going to rotate from the Adamantium Claws into the one skill, Intrepid Dash, that does laceration. Now I'm dealing more damage to enemies when they're in ruptured. I'm dealing more damage to enemies when they're in laceration. The majority of Wolverine's skills are going to be applying one or the other. So when you see something that says like, oh, it's going to apply 20% rupture damage or 20% more damage from laceration, so then you can just stack that and go, well, that's 30% from the laceration from my specialization, plus another 20 from this skill, so that's 50% more damage to an enemy in laceration state. You see what I'm saying there? So this is essentially one of those skills that you want to play with inside there. I didn't notice it till a little bit later after I finished leveling up like some of the other skills on the tree, especially two of the other ones. Now, there are some specific PvP skills in here that I want you to pay attention to that could be highly utilized inside the game, right? So you see here we've got using a Swift Strike class skill increases short range damage reduction damage reduction rate by X% for 8 seconds, and this is enhanced endurance. So this is going to be one of those good skills because most of the players that you're going to be playing off, they're probably going to be short range, so it's going to be short range damage reduction. Spider-Man's king of the hill for a reason, right? But you might not like that ability in terms of where it is. It becomes one of those things that's really concerning to me because it is like situational. Like am I in that range for short range damage reduction? We'll see. Right, another one inside, two of the other ones that I actually really like that I think are going to be part of everybody's kit if they're inside PvP, especially if they're doing Dimension Duels or Alliance Omega War or anything else like that, is Adamantium Claws Dead End. Decreases damage received by X% when the dodge gauge is at 1 or below. So you're going to be using your dodge gauge and you're going to be timing those, and basically it gives you a trigger event to happen that you know you're going to be having your damage down low when you're not mobile, right? So like I'm moving, I'm agile like the way Wolverine and Spider-Man is supposed to be, but then I'm stuck in place while those are basically being used and running around. Well, guess what? I'm going to be receiving decreased damage while that dodge gauge is below 1. So pay attention to that, right? Really good skill, but also notice that this is going to benefit the active player because it's not going to help you if you're just one of those people who jumps inside PvP, auto plays it, and that's it, because the autoplay doesn't use the dodge gauge, right? Next up over here on the top right, we've got Adamantium Claw Strategic Movement, which touches on that dodge skill again. Basically, when you use the dodge skill, you get a increase in your defense pierce by X% and your debuff resistance by X%. There's a cooldown of 8 seconds on this. This is really cool because that basically means that you've got 3 chances to basically increase your defense pierce, which gives you a natural boost on the character to have defense pierce. So whereas I need to look at before having the max damage, having the max number for defense pierce, now I can take off the percentage from this specialization and not have to worry about it because I know that every time I hit my dodge skill, I'm basically going to have that defense pierce available to me. It almost plays out the same way like Doctor Strange's skill does, where he gives defense pierce to characters and you just basically top up the cup because it's not going to matter if you hit the max level or go over, so there's no point in doing that. You know what I mean? Like, at least especially in this game where you have so many stats to spread the wealth between. So just think about that. Now, we've gone over pretty much all the other skills inside of here, and realistically, like I said, the really cool thing is Wolverine's got maybe about 2 skills in here that I just don't see any value in terms of like specifically for me going into. Now, like I said, I'm probably going to play with the abilities inside here, and I'm going to go like a little bit different. So you can see I got enduring damage there. You see I got dead end. And then you see I've got strategic movement, and you see on the bottom here I'm still using the Swift Strike class skill. That's basically the way I'm looking at the skill overall to be able to be utilized, because that's the viability to me in PvP. So you want to consider that. Just think about that, how that plays across. You want to be considering that overall in terms of your actual numbers and your stats. So when I talk about the stat sheet for like that defense pierce, for instance, basically that's you looking down the barrel over here and saying, hey, my defense pierce is at 55.5%, right? Okay, so at what point is too much for me? Because if I'm gonna level up the Adamantium Claws specialization and the max, I think the max, I cannot remember what the max values were right now. It's so crazy because I had those numbers in my head for so long and I've kind of pulled back a little bit from the game. I'd have to find the spreadsheet again to see what the max values are, but I think it was 75%, right? So let's say defense pierce max value 75%, and let's say I'm getting a total of maybe 25% from that skill. So now instead of having to go further into defense pierce, I don't need to do that. You know what I mean? Like I can just cop out at like, you know, 50% instead, and I get that 25% because I know I'm going to get that 25% every single time, and there's no point in me going over. So that's essentially what you're looking at there. So Wolverine has some really good stuff in and of itself for that. I hope you guys enjoyed the video about these specializations and hope they give you some idea about where to go with your character builds. There's a lot here for Wolverine, and he's got a whole lot of substance, not a whole lot of flash. Until next time, guys, peace.